Meet Robbie Ellis, mild-mannered student by day,
Ninja Legomaniac by night.
There's something you learn to accept when researching LEGO's older products.
I know that ninja stuff. That is true Legomania. The new Lego Ninja Collection.
LEGO's old marketing was dumb. Welcome everyone to LEGO Rewind, where we take another look at old retired LEGO themes. Say, anyone remember that time in the mid-2000s when LEGO went, "Hey kids, do you like anime?"
Neo-America's ultimate weapon, the Statue of Liberty cannon.
And lo, Exo Force was made. Personally, I think its working title, Battle Peak, sounded cooler. Exo Force was inspired by various mecha series with colorful rockstar hair, big aggressive eyes and all. Where was that hairpiece in 2001? You know, Studios was one of the first lines to feature double faces. They appear a lot in 2002, but weren't used much again until 2006, with most if not all of Exo Force's human characters including a serious face and an angry face. The angry face was often the one featured on the box art, to really get the dynamic manga art style across. Double faces are extremely common nowadays, thanks in part to lines like Exo Force normalizing them, to the point that many now consider it strange if a minifig doesn't have eyes on the back of their head. It was also the first line to feature those robot arms, reused in numerous other lines over the years, often as fingers of larger LEGO mechs, and even one or two Bionicle characters like Hydraxin. But I ain't here to talk about minifigs. The first system-based giant robots appeared in classic LEGO Space. 1980's Mobile Lab is their original ancestor in my view, as many of the actual mechs to appear several years later had a similar construction, just a mobile platform suspended on wheels or funky legs that slid rather than walked. 1984's Robot Command Center was the first really big bipedal one. Robots of this size class wouldn't be seen again until 97's Robo Force, which I think only had 4 sets. But even these were primitive to say the least. The first major evolutionary jump came a few years later in a theme we've already covered in an earlier episode. Life on Mars was invaluable for contributing proper leg articulation, bending up and down and swiveling outward independently, not strung together as usually done in the past. We'd see another major leap in 2004's Knight's Kingdom 2, which aren't robots, but they're somewhere between Mars's mechs and Bionicle figures, the first brick-built figures to boast ratcheted knee and elbow articulation. It was only a matter of time before something like Exo Force came along. These days, most LEGO mechs have pre-bent knees. Some of their new mechs really are too big and heavy for articulating knees or even ankles to support their weight, so that's understandable, but even the smaller ones are designed this way, and I really don't understand why. The last giant robot I remember having knees was the King's mech in 2016's Nexo Knights. At least they tried. Exo Force's mid-range mechs were just the right size and weight class to have this range of mobility and balance, not compromising either. I really like the way they organized these. Each year began with 2 heroes and 2 villains in the mid-range at $15, a smaller support unit on each team if that's all you could afford, and then a free-for-all of various other size classes and playsets. Some of these builds were downright monstrous. They made a decent effort to connect them together in the story, to make each and every mech feel important. Every win or loss for the humans was an event. The story starts on a mountain where mining robots rebel against their human creators. The ensuing battle split the mountain, but soon after the victorious humans build bridges to reconnect the two halves, the robots rise again stronger than ever, claiming an entire side to themselves. Today the mountain, tomorrow the world. The characters were decent. Hikaru's the serious one who needs to learn to be more flexible. Takeshi's the brash, hot-headed one with insecurities and self-doubt. Ryo's more of an engineer than a warrior at heart, striving to give the humans an edge with his designs. And Hayato's the carefree, showy flyboy who gets into trouble a lot. Wait a second. These are just the Ninja Turtles. Oh jeez, well there you go. Their leader, Sensei Keiken, created and is eventually captured by the robot now leading the rebellion, forcing his pilots to step up their game and take charge in absence of his guidance. His granddaughter Hitomi would eventually become a pilot herself, and without Keiken around, she became their new leader. The enemies came in 3 variants. Copper drones, the most common ones, sometimes piloted smaller machines of their own or acted as assistant gunners, but usually rushed into battle with little more than a gun. The silver ones, Devastators, were essentially the human pilot's equals, much smarter than drones and able to make their own decisions in the heat of battle, piloting their own large mechs. Mecha 1, their gold-plated leader, didn't often appear in set form, but did pilot a couple of battle machines himself. I say himself, but they're really just spare bodies. Every time he falls in battle, he uploads his memory to a new body somewhere and uses whatever he learned from his last battle to outsmart the humans next time. I suppose the only way to defeat him would be by trapping him in one body and destroying that, which is probably how it was going to end, We'll get to that. Granted, the idea of giant enemy robots piloted by human-sized, human-shaped robots instead of their own onboard AI seems kinda silly, but it's the rule of cool, especially seeing how little protection they have compared to the Exo Force pilots. The humans have windscreens shielding them from the elements and whiplash, but the robots don't need that. Just look at how exposed the Iron Condor's pilot is. He's barely hanging in there. These robots don't care about their own safety. Each year had a very different feel, but the first year had the best look, I think. The robots' battle machines were darkly colored, mostly black with some dark red, blue, and tan complemented by a bit of lime green for contrast, and sometimes the colors were mixed up in weird chaotic ways. They were jagged and rough, stripped down in some areas and bulked up in others. Lots of corners and uneven pointy protrusions giving them a vicious, unconventional style. The humans' mechs were the complete opposite, very brightly colored with lots of smooth, sleek shaping pleasing to the human eye. They were cool, they were functional, and most importantly, they were distinct. From the Thunder Fury's downward sloping shoulders and giant cannon to the Fire Vulture's single humongous turbine, to the Sonic Phantom's front-loaded engines, to the Mobile Tank's angled treads and missile pods, to the Striking Venom's upward towering knee spikes, to the Grand Titan's rounded bulk and crazy scissors, to the Stealth Hunter's long fairy-like wings. Every battle machine has its own iconic shape that makes it stand out from the rest, and often in the subtlest ways, even down to whatever covering they put on the thighs and upper arms to make something slightly spikier, chunkier, or smoother. And because most of the main ones aren't that big, they gotta come up with creative uses for various pieces. And I'm not talking about using Matau's swords as a claw or Avaki's staff as a saw blade. I'm talking about the small stuff, like making a magazine out of a simple tile stacked on a plate. I know some people hate stickers with a passion, and I didn't use all of them on my set since, well, there were a lot, but I like the ones that give a clear purpose to something, that tell a story, ones that say, hot, do not touch, stuff like that. Hikaru's rifle is just part of a Borak skull with a barrel and a couple other bits on it, and it looks perfect! Even later ones have these interesting details like using those bricks with grooves on the sides to simulate vent covers, and they did that thing you see in a lot of Gundam series where halfway through the story they'll be forced to upgrade to a fancier, even more powerful over-the-top version of the Gundam they already had, but they did it for all 4 pilots in the first year. Check out Hikaru's second machine, the Silent Strike. They don't call it that because its engines are quiet. This thing can soundproof the space around itself so you don't hear it coming. I don't even know how that's possible, but it's amazing. And a lot of them have some cool special trick like that in the story that's pretty darn creative most of the time. It's so disappointing to me that you can't get the Silent Strike by itself. You have to pay for all this other stuff just to get that. Still, $100 for almost 1,500 pieces? That's actually not bad, and if this were a licensed theme, they'd probably charge you $170 or more these days. In fact, Exo Force's price-to-piece ratio is the best I've seen out of any line I've rewound thus far, and this is consistent throughout all 3 years. Very rarely, like once or twice, do you see the piece count dip below 100 pieces per $10 on average. Usually it goes well above that, and it's not even like they're just inflating the piece count with a bunch of tiny pieces all the time. Some of these mechs are gargantuan, practically a Metal Gear in their own right. And oh, the weapons. Every time the robots unleashed some earth-shattering new monstrosity, the humans had to fight that much harder. It was an arms race unlike any I've ever seen in a LEGO theme. You really felt the tension keeping up with the online comics. One of their grittier themes for sure, but never going too far. Even adjusting for inflation, Exo Force generally gave you a lot of bang for your buck. One of the best things about it? The all builds and combiner models. There were so many different things you could make out of these displayed on the back of the box or in LEGO magazine, sometimes with instructions. It was great. They don't promote alternate builds as much nowadays. Sets tend to have the one intended purpose with a few gimmicks and that's it. But Exo Force was surprisingly versatile and you were encouraged to experiment with it. There was only one thing about the first year in particular that bugged me. About 10 of its 16 sets included cores, which lit up transparent elements connected to them. If say you stick the far end into a drone's head, it creates a glowing eye effect. But any cores you find now are probably so weak the light won't even make it halfway down the cable. In the case of the more humanoid sets, the torsos were built entirely around this gimmick, part of it able to slide down as you push this trigger to light them up. This, unfortunately, makes the first year set some of the most flimsy, unstable builds in the whole line, as this not only makes the front jet out further than I'd like, but they tend to fall apart if you push a trigger too hard. Aside from that, they were great. They really were. But thankfully, later waves would ditch this gimmick entirely and focus on just making solid builds. But are they still cool designs? Exo Force's first year made a heck of a first impression, and it's hard to follow up on an act like that. This is something LEGO tends to do a lot. They put their best foot forward in the first year, the first wave even, as they should, but then they end up either going in circles or watering things down in later years because there isn't much room for improvement, causing lines to stagnate quickly. The second year took place further up the mountain in a golden city, where battle machines were left in storage for centuries that are kinda primitive looking. The gang had a tricky time getting the hang of the older controls, but these machines somehow proved to be more powerful than the modern, sleeker looking ones they'd been using. In all fairness, I'm fine with the story justification for year 2 sets looking the way they do. Older technology from past civilizations being superior to modern technology made by their descendants essentially playing catch-up is a pretty common trope, not just in anime, but pretty much all sci-fi. And I do think this clunkier ancient look can be done well. Just take a look at the Golden Guardian, that thing's grand. But the mid-range ones, 2007 also featured 16 sets, but 5 of them were polybags as opposed to the previous year's 3, and the other sets weren't nearly as consistent in terms of design as in 2006. The robots didn't change that much. Their battle machines became a little more bestial looking in terms of posture, but the aesthetic was mostly the same. The humans' machines were all over the place, and not always for the best. In year 1, each machine had its own color that made them pop next to the other ones. In many of year 2's cases, a machine's primary color is much darker. Dark red, dark blue, dark green, colors you'd expect the villains to have. And that on its own isn't a problem, but they clash so hard against the white and yellow bits they all have, which often overpower the supposed primary color. I appreciate trying to tie them together that way to create some consistency between multiple robots, but these secondary colors are so unevenly spaced, it gets hard to look at in some lighting. Just compare these two shelves. Look at how simple and clear and distinct the early sets are. Now look at how busy these look by comparison. They blend together because their shared colors are so loud, drowning out their muted individual colors like a backdrop. And that's just the colors, the shaping is plain weird. They all have things I like, such as the Sky Guardian's chest turbines and feathery wings, but then it's got that big doofy sword, the giant feet and super thin legs, the Zamra launcher that really doesn't fit, and the upper arms are Toa pelvises of all things. Okay. Again, the intent was obviously to make these look more ancient and clockworkish, but you can still make that look cool and defined, and there are a couple of standouts that do this. Get a load of this. Those bulbous engines, those absurdly huge guns, those controls for a machine already being controlled by a person's hands. The actual robot bar is just an excuse to hook all that other stuff together. I love this. It's something we see a lot of in anime, like, oh, we just developed this new apparatus that will get you halfway across the solar system in no time, but we haven't tested it yet. And then they use it once and it breaks just as they make it there and we never see it again. The designers behind this line know their stuff, I'll give them that. Still, out of all 3 years' aesthetics, I'd say this was the weakest. I also noticed a couple of weird trends pop up around this time. I find it neat how the early sets used ratchet joints, the smallest sets having those simple hinges, and the larger sets' arm-mounted weapons were usually light enough that those smaller hinges were all the support they needed. But over time, they shifted more towards the balls and sockets used to line Bionicle. You'd think this would make the machines more flexible, but they were often situated in very awkward ways that impeded pretty basic movements. This is also where those pre-bent knot knees first began popping up. Uh-oh. I also noticed a sharp decline in the artwork towards the end. The first year gave us forward-facing portraits of the characters on the boxes, pretty basic stuff. Year 2, we got a more dynamic shot of them from an angle like they're leaping into action, with a banner going down the side that gave us a close-up of their face. Very nice. They were drawn consistently throughout the first 2 years, but in year 3 they just look awkward. I'd guess they were going for a looser style like Slayers, but they just end up looking like characters from an early harem anime. They aren't even that well drawn here, it's just what Western people think anime style is through a distorted lens like My Life Me, like, hey, you like anime? I like anime too, I totes swear I loves it, this is what it looks like, right? Konnichiwa! There was a sincerity to the earlier art, short-lived but appreciated. I guess they just really wanted to make each year feel different. The third year was unfortunately cut short. The team chases Kagan's captors into a jungle at the base of the mountain, where Mecha 1 is hiding out in the very lab where he was originally designed. I like this. It's cool to see the characters reach the bottom of this mountain after fighting on bridges or flying around the summit for 2 years, and ending it at Kagan's lab where it all began? That's just beautiful storytelling. This year only saw 7 sets, not even half as many as each other year. I didn't like how they looked at first, but it's grown on me a lot over the years. They each have a distinct color and shape again, like in the beginning, and the more stable builds are clunky in a way I would have liked the second year's machines to look. They're gruff and brutal looking, made for the trenches. Not great, but pretty darn good. I don't care much for the thighs being flat tiles, but whatever. Their weapons were also their own transformable robots, minicons essentially. The Dragonfly is my favorite. The enemy's machines were even more bestial now, well adapted to the jungle's environment, giving them something of a home advantage. 3 good guys, 3 bad guys, and a larger tank set. Pretty standard. Ideally, a theme should have 6 waves spread over 3 years, but Exo Force, much like Nexo Knights and Ninjago's first run, only lasted 5 waves over 2.5 years. More like just 2 years if you really think about it, the last wave being released 2 winters after the first. I think the tank may have been released a few months after the other 6 sets, but I'd hardly call one set a wave. So yeah, they rescued their master, and I guess you could say the story is finished, but it doesn't feel that way. We didn't see the final showdown with Mecha 1 piloting some awesome final boss type of robot. We didn't learn how the mountain split or what his end goal was. It just ends with the boys still on the run from the robots. Actually, I think I remember the last time I ever saw an Exo Force comic, it ended with an image of Kaken still caged in Mecha 1's lair, with a narration going, "You decide how it ends." It's pretty depressing. Heck, just look at this set that was cancelled at the last minute. I guess the first year sold well enough, but the second year didn't, so they wrapped it up in a hurry. It's such a shame. But it's not like we never see giant Lego robots again. They're so common now and spread throughout so many lines that dedicating an entire 3-year theme to just that may be more trouble than it's worth now. But it's not like the creative minds behind Exo Force aren't still busy. The mechs based on the Ninjago movie were designed by those same people, at least one guy anyway, and it's not hard to see some of the spirit of Exo Force living on through lines like that. But as big and impressive as those are, I wouldn't mind them taking another go at something smaller someday. Exo Force was nice because many of its robots were so easily affordable. Getting 1 or 2 mid-range ones at a time was no problem. They don't need to be super huge or super bulky, just something reasonably priced and full of character. That much shouldn't be too hard. Of course, even the way they approach smaller robots is very different these days. Exo Force has a pretty dedicated fan base. Not only are they still making mocks after all these years, the theme has an entire fan-made wiki dedicated to it. Not that many LEGO themes have that privilege as part of their legacy. And there are people continuing the story through their own fanfictions, much like I did with Bionicle G1 in my Nova Orbis series, which I do want to get back to sooner or later if I can just find the time and energy for it again. Exo Force is one of those themes where there's really nothing else quite like it. Nothing the same came before, and nothing has since. Yeah, I mean, Invasion from Below tried to be the same, but is it really? It hit just the perfect sweet spot for a time. It was a fun experiment with a clear passion behind it and a genuine fondness for the mecha genre and the Japanese stories that inspired this. It wasn't just a shallow marketing gimmick cashing in on a fad, and it's inspired many a young builder of my time who love it to this day. I don't see any future episodes getting this long, but there's just so many things to be said about this line. I hope I did it justice. Thanks for listening, and please consider supporting my books. I just released Volume 3 on Amazon for print and Kindle. It's going to be a little while before I release more episodes. This recent string of them was essentially my way of making up for lost time. I still gotta review Sonic Mania and Forces before the next LEGO Rewind if I can. When that time comes, we'll take a gander at a couple old dinosaur themes and see how those evolved. Toodles! Also, don't do this. Never do this.
On the Split Sentai Mountain, evil robots want to rule the human side. Exo Force fighters defend the mountain. Gear up the specially constructed, powerful, and heavily armed battle machines. It's time to man the controls, power up, get into action, and save the mountain. New LEGO Exo Force!